Hi, I'm Darcel Lobo and I own Dow Law Firm in Normandy Park and talking to you today about FSBOs, for sale by owner transactions, whether you're the buyer or the seller. Generally, when clients come to me in a for sale by owner transaction, they've identified the other party and some of the key terms. They've already kind of discussed those things, and I'm kind of helping to guide them through the process, go over some of the details, prepare the contract, facilitate the process through title and escrow, and make sure that we get to closing. And so in doing so, it's very helpful if you and the other party have already discussed some of these key terms, and that's what I wanted to go over with you today. So if you contact our office and you indicate that you're looking to do a for sale by owner transaction, whether you're the seller or the buyer, we'll give you an intake form that goes over some of the bigger details and some things to consider. You may not have all the answers, but we're here to help you through that process, and that's fine. But let's go over some of the few key items that you should discuss with the other party when you're coming together about a for sale by owner transaction. I think first and foremost, the most obvious will be the price. What is going to be the sales price of the property, whether you're the seller or the buyer? Generally, when people come to me in a for sale by owner transaction, they've already decided upon the price. But if you're thinking about a for sale by owner transaction and you don't have a price yet, you'll want to talk with the other party about the price. If you're not sure, you certainly can get some estimated values. You can have an appraisal of the property done. That'd be the best way to come up with the proper value, would be to have a full appraisal. I think these days appraisals are costing about $700 or $800 usually and take a few weeks to obtain, but that's the best way to get a value. Looking online at Redfin or Zillow, they're usually pretty high, and then the tax assessed value is usually kind of low. So I mean, whatever you and the other party agree upon is fine, but if you're looking for some direction, looking online kind of gives you an idea of the range, but I would not trust that for the actual property value. I would instead get a valuation from an agent or pay for a full appraisal to see what the property value is based on the condition of the home and the comparable sales in your area. So aside from price, the date as far as closing. So for either the seller or the buyer, there could be some key dates that they have in mind as far as when they want the transaction to close. Maybe the seller is moving, maybe the buyer needs to move by a certain date. So knowing everyone's time frames and when everyone wants to close is very helpful. Keep in mind, if the buyer is obtaining financing to buy the home, so they're getting a mortgage loan from a bank, you're going to need at least 30 days, probably more like 40 days for closing, just given the time frame for the appraisal, and if there's going to be an inspection, I would plan for at least 30 days, but know that it could take 40 days. If it is a cash purchase, the buyer is bringing cash to the table to buy the property, then we could probably close within 10 days or so, within 2 weeks. We'll have to work with title and escrow, but usually it's pretty quick to sell the property if it's going to be a cash transaction and there is no mortgage company involved for the funding of the buyer's loan to buy the home. And that brings us to our next term, is buyer financing. So if there is a buyer that's going to obtain financing to purchase the home, we want to make sure that they already have a lender, they're already pre-approved, and so to know that they have the ability to purchase the home for what the price may be on this contract. So if you're the buyer, you want to make sure that you have that in order, that you already have your lender, that you already have that pre-approval, you've already provided your financials to the lender, and underwriting's already reviewed that to give the pre-approval. If you're a seller and you have a buyer that's going to get a loan to buy your home, you want to make sure that they have a pre-approval letter, and they should have that in writing, and you want to see that to make sure that you're not spending time on a transaction that the buyer isn't going to be able to move forward on. So we don't want to invest our time and money into this transaction without knowing that both parties can see the contract through. Next key item is excise tax. That's a biggie. Excise tax, it varies. The amount of the tax varies depending on the purchase price of the home. The county kind of has like a tiered structure as far as how much it'll be, but plan on between 1.5% and 2% of the sales price being paid as a tax. It's called excise tax. Think of it as like a sales tax essentially, that goes to the county when the home is sold. And so again, between 1.5 and 2%. So if the sales price of the home is $500,000, plan on between $7,500 and $10,000 in excise tax. Generally speaking, it is traditional that the seller pays that excise tax, but it's not required. The parties can agree to either the buyer pays it, the seller pays it, or they split it in half, or whatever the parties want to agree to. But that's one key term to think about, and a lot of times clients don't think about that before they come to us, and that's a big chunk of money to add on top of the sales price. So keep in mind, you're going to have closing costs, you're going to have legal fees, you're going to have title and escrow fees, but the biggest one is going to be your excise tax that's due at closing. Escrow will pay that when they record the deed transferring title. So again, plan for just shy of 2%. The exact amount of that excise tax can be quoted for you once we know the exact sales price of the property. Next one is title and escrow. This one is not as much of a big deal. You'll want to pick who your title and escrow company will be. It would not be our office. We do not act as title and escrow. We just handle the contract and assist with through the process to title and escrow and closing. But title and escrow actually handles the closing and the exchanging of the money. And so if you don't know who you want to use, that's okay. Our office has recommendations, or if the buyer is using a lender, sometimes that lender will have a preferred title and escrow company. And so just let us know if you've already picked someone, if you haven't picked someone, or if your lender has a recommendation as far as who they want to use. It's perfectly fine, but just something to keep in mind that we'll have to decide as well, because once the for sale by owner contract is signed, we need to get that to title and escrow so they can start working on their end to prepare this matter for the eventual closing on the transaction. And then lastly, I would say a home inspection. If you're the buyer, you'll want to decide if you want to do a home inspection. When I have for sale by owner transactions, sometimes the parties to the transaction are related. Maybe it's a family home, maybe a parent is selling it to a child, maybe a neighbor is selling it to someone, you know, who lives next door. And so you don't have to have an inspection if you don't want one as a buyer. I would highly recommend it as a buyer. This is a pretty big investment that you're making into a property purchase, so I would recommend that you have a walkthrough home inspection, but it's not required. So the buyer will need to decide if they're going to have an inspection or not. If the buyer is getting financing for the purchase, and if they're using FHA for their financing, FHA will do their own inspection on the home. And regardless of who the lender is, if there is going to be a loan for the purchase, the lender will want an appraisal of the property. But that's different than an inspection. The appraiser is coming out to determine the value of the property based on its current condition, but they're not inspecting the systems of the home. They're not inspecting your HVAC and electrical and figuring out how many years are left on the roof and how the foundation looks. They're just trying to confirm what the value is of that property. And so as the buyer, if you're buying a home, you'll want to decide if you want to do an inspection. Again, if you're familiar with the home, if it's a family home, you may not feel the need to do an inspection, but otherwise, and I recommend it to all my clients who are buyers, but it's not needed, so you'll want to decide if you're going to have an inspection. So that's it for our top terms that you'll want to think about when entering into a for sale by owner contract. Again, at our office, once you contact us, we have a pretty lengthy, it's about 3 pages, intake sheet for you to go over more of the details of the contract. And if you don't have all the items figured out or determined yet, that's what we're here for. We're here to help you and to guide you through that process and help you fill in the blanks. So if you need help with the for sale by owner transaction, if you're a buyer or a seller, give us a call at 206-408-8158. or visit us online at dallawfirm.com, which is DALLAWFIRM.com. Thank you.